Good evening. My name is Phil Cook. I'm the immediate past chair of Public Counsel's Board of Directors. Welcome to our third of 10 Hour of Justice panel discussions, where we explore a variety of legal and social challenges facing our communities. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm honored to be here to introduce tonight's topic and panel, but first I want to thank and acknowledge the co-sponsors of Public Counsel's Hour of Justice series: the Beverly Hills Bar Association, the Daily Journal, the LA chapter of the Federal Bar Association, the litigation section of the LA County Bar Association, and the Mexican American Bar Association. We appreciate your support. As you may know, Public Counsel is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Public Counsel has grown to become the nation's largest pro bono law firm. With 130 attorneys, social workers, and support staff, Public Counsel works with 5,000 volunteer lawyers, law students, and others from major law firms and corporations every year, and assists over 20,000 children, youth, families, and community organizations. Our activities are far-ranging and impact a wide spectrum of people who live at or below the poverty level. Tonight, we're going to focus on the dynamics of United States immigration policies and the consequences they impose on our clients and client communities. Tonight's panel discussion is entitled, "What Makes a Country a Home? Changing Immigration Law in the United States." Our panel will focus on the vexing and complicated issue of immigration. The Trump administration has implemented numerous changes to immigration laws and policies that have impacted tens of thousands in inhumane, life-shattering ways. With that presidency soon coming to an end, what can we expect from the Biden administration when it comes to addressing this long simmering issue? And beyond Biden, what can we expect from other local, state, and national leaders to get us potential solutions to address legal immigration? We are very fortunate to have a well-informed and respected panel tonight to explore this topic, and it is my pleasure and honor to introduce them now. First, Martha Arevalo, the Executive Director of the Central American Resource Center. In its more than 30 years of existence, CARACEN has gone from a small grassroots group to the largest Central American organization in the country, providing low-cost immigration legal services, policy advocacy in immigration, and working for the rights of all immigrants. Next is Judy London. Judy is the directing attorney for Public Counsel's Immigrants' Rights Project, or IRP. Public Counsel is one of the few organizations in Los Angeles that provides direct legal representation to persons seeking asylum. IRP assists clients seeking asylum before the Los Angeles Asylum Office and Immigration Court, the Board of Immigration Appeals, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And just a quick note, Judy is really the one responsible for assembling this entire panel tonight. This is a tight-knit and well-coordinated community of legal professionals that communicate and work with each other on a regular basis. We're grateful to have all of you, and thank you, Judy, for the invitations. Angelica Salas is the Executive Director of CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. CHIRLA is a California leader with national impact made of diverse immigrant families and individuals who act as agents of social change to achieve a world with freedom of mobility, full human rights, and true participatory democracy. CHIRLA's mission is to achieve a just society fully inclusive of immigrants. And finally, our moderator tonight is Nora Preciado, Director for Immigrant Affairs in the Office of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. Nora is an attorney with nearly 15 years advocating for the rights of immigrants. She most recently served as a supervising attorney at the National Immigration Law Center, where she took on legal and legislative advocacy efforts at all levels of government to protect the rights of low-income immigrants and refugees. Nora previously was an adjunct professor at Loyola Law School and defended immigrant rights as an attorney with the ACLU Foundation of Southern California. Just a quick word about our format tonight. Nora will be moderating our discussion for about 40 to 45 minutes. And at about 6:45, we will give all of you an opportunity to have the panelists answer your questions via the chat function on YouTube until we end at 7 o'clock. My request is that you not wait until 6:45 to ask your questions. Go ahead, write them in the chat as we go along. We will be monitoring them and passing along as many questions as possible to Nora. Finally, thank you, panelists, for being here. We're delighted you all could join us. And now I pass the baton to Nora.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you ladies, and always a pleasure to collaborate. I'm going to just get us started with a quick sort of framing and setting the context for tonight's conversation. I don't want to take too much time because I know that it's going to be a very robust discussion. I do want to just remind everyone, for the last 4 years under this administration, there have been a great number of policies and policy changes aimed at restricting immigration, both lawful and unauthorized migration. We've seen those changes at the border and in the interior, and the devastating consequences on communities. We all remember the travel bans or Muslim ban issued by executive order at the very beginning of this administration in January of 2017. And little did we know that it was only the beginning of what amounts to a string of endless, cruel, and many times unlawful policies in the immigration area. At the border, we've seen the obsession with the wall, the militarization of our border, the continued criminalization of immigrants through programs like zero tolerance and family separation, the expansion of Operation Streamline, the gutting of the asylum program, the expansion of detention, including the detention of children, and the dismal detention conditions that continue to be exacerbated. And then there's also what we call the invisible or second wall, a number of administrative changes that, as the Huffington Post aptly put it, a phrase that vanishes from an internal manual, a form that gets longer, an unannounced revision to a website, a memo, a footnote in a memo, all of them having devastating consequences. All of those barriers, you more than anyone, because you live this every day, are making the immigration process more restrictive, onerous, and lengthier. And so it is in that context that you and your amazing teams at Carece and Chile Public Counsel have been carrying on your valiant work for the last 4 years. And so I want to ask you a really basic question. What have been the greatest challenges in your work in the last 4 years? And if you can share with us a little bit about the impact on the communities you serve, specifically here in LA. So let's get started, and maybe we'll go around. Judy, you want to take the floor? You're mute.
Thank you, Nora. And I just want to thank my colleagues for being here tonight and for their leadership. And thinking about this panel, I realized that among our guests, there's about a century of leadership of the immigrant rights movement. And I hope I'm not aging anyone. We're combining those years, but it's bringing me great joy to be with them this evening. In terms of the challenges, wow, all of them. I think the last 4 years have been similar to a game of whack-a-mole, except with very deadly consequences. And what I mean by that is, whether it's an individual case or a policy, we develop strategy and we fight in the courts. We fight for individual clients and we bring class actions and have strategies. And every week, as there are new, generally unlawful policies issued from Washington, we have to recalibrate and change our strategy and leave one suit thinking we've won, only to be back at square one and another. And even within a lawsuit, the extent to which the government will double down on illegality has been breathtaking. And I'm just to make it a little more concrete, we brought a lawsuit to challenge the unlawful denial of relief to thousands of children who are eligible for something called special immigrant juvenile status. It's a way that vulnerable kids who've been abused have a path to citizenship, and the government has really armed itself to harm these children. And we went into court and we won, but we thought we won, but in violation of our settlement, the government went ahead and deported 5 class members back to their home countries, one who was significantly injured just as he was returned. We went back to the judge, got a ruling holding the Department of Homeland Security in contempt, Chad Wolf in contempt. The government had to bring back those 5 class members. We again thought we won, and then the government said, well, we said we'd bring them back, but we're actually going to re-detain them, but this time in adult detention, and we think we can deport them again. So we had to rush back into court on habeas petitions. This is just one example of one case among the dozens of cases we're involved in, and the hundreds, if not thousands, of individual cases we handle. It's just the ever-moving target, the intensity in which the government wants to harm immigrants, and just one more part of that, and then I'll stop talking. That goes hand in hand is really just the emotional challenge of dealing with this work, because we are dealing with people and we are seeing the harms up close. A lot of our staff come from immigrant families who are targets. And just last week, one of our lawyers who's 6 months pregnant was asked to go to court with a client, a child at 18. The child herself was a mother of an infant. Not surprisingly, our lawyer chose to seek a continuance because it's not healthy to go into a public courtroom pregnant. And the judge denied this, forced the child with her infant to go take public transportation, sit in a courtroom. And what's really egregious here is that when the judge appeared, the judge was not in the courtroom. The judge was appearing from home or elsewhere by video. And the ICE attorney, the government attorney, was allowed to call in. And we had an 18-year-old and infant exposed for over 2.5 hours in probably one of the worst COVID surges we've seen. So the emotional cost, I think, is high. And I think it's going to take a good deal of healing for people to build up their resilience again.
Thank you, Judy. And it's also, I want to point out the emotional cost and like all of the attorneys, all of you doing the work day to day, not just the clients. So I want to turn it over to Angelica to share your perspective.
So I think I'll start around, in terms of my perspective, really echoing the words of one of our members who said the other day when there was, a change in the political environment, which has said, it felt like suddenly I saw a little glimmer of light come through. And so that these last 4 years have been incredibly dark, and that it felt like it started off very dark and it just got darker and darker and darker throughout the 4 years, because that which was horrible in terms of policy and action was just followed by more actions, as you aptly described in sort of the opening framing of this conversation. So our organization works directly with immigrants through organizing. So we organize low-wage workers, we organize immigrant youth, and we organize entire families throughout California. And what we saw was just first the fear, the constant living with this constant fear, the sense of lack of well-being, and really, especially, and I want to really say especially for the young people, and even, and it didn't matter if you were an immigrant or a citizen, if you're a citizen child of parents who are undocumented, you live with the same kind of fear. And certainly that's been before Trump, but completely exacerbated during this time. So the first thing that happened across the state was our committees that were organized themselves to protect each other, to rapidly respond through rapid response networks to ensure that if any family member was picked up, that there was a call to legal service representatives who could actually assist. If it wasn't, in many instances, it would be us directly as CHIRLA, but in other instances, in other regions, it was others, trying to make sure that families were protected. We definitely saw huge violations of worker rights during these 4 years, because it also empowered bad actors in the workplace, and in just, I would say, in public spaces and in private spaces, to feel empowered to also attack immigrants. But certainly, I think it's very important to say what is happening to immigrant workers during these 4 years. So, of course, we see all the different kind of attacks in various other immigration law, sort of areas, but certainly in the workplace. I have never seen so much violation of wage and hour rights of individuals. And then especially, and I want us to say, and especially in areas where maybe the local government wasn't as friendly. What we also saw these 4 years is just in terms of the policy and advocacy, where we were responding constantly to changes. And so that meant that if there was the federal government took action that was negative, many times we had to work with you, Nora, and with others, certainly at the city, at the state level, to try to ameliorate and try to create protection at the very local level. So the kind of constant action around policy and advocacy, we just never expected, but it was necessary. And maybe what I want to end up with on this, in terms of what were the last 4 years like, I also want to bring up the goodness that we saw, because with all the horribleness that was coming in terms of the policy, the fighting in the courts, the family separation, the attacks on the census, and the list is so long. What we also saw was people coming forward and saying, this is not acceptable to me. How can I stand with you? How can I support the organization? What can we do? How can I use my platform to say that immigrants and refugees need to be supported? And I don't want us to forget that piece of what these last 4 years have been. And that gives me hope for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Angelica. Martha?
Thank you, and happy 50th anniversary to Public Counsel, and thank you for this invitation. It's so hard to come after such articulate, smart women, but just to add and echo the difficulties that we've lived through in the last 4 years. I'm a Salvadoran, and I lived through the Civil War in El Salvador, and I want to say that the last 4 years felt very much like a war. We really went into a long-term crisis mode. Working in immigrant rights, there's always crises, but they're a few months apart, or maybe one every year. I think the last 4 years, every day was a crisis. We were always on crisis mode, and it's really hard to do work that way. But really our goal and our focus, often we would say to ourselves and to our teams, would be, let's try to protect as many people as we can. And let's try to get through these 4 years, as quickly as we can, with as many families together as we can, keep them together as we can. I want to say that as an organizational leader, it's very hard to be effective. It's very hard to be strategic, to plan when you're always having to be responding to the crisis of the day. And so it's been challenging in new ways as well, trying to be creative, how to keep our teams motivated, how to protect our teams as much as we can, provide them with new tools to also get through and help their clients and help the community members get through the day, or get through this new policy change. Often as an organizational leader, I would ask myself, how long can we sustain this? And I think that, we really saw this election as an election that impacted, had an incredible impact, and that we were fighting for our lives. And so I think that is what Angelica was trying to say about members saying, now I can begin to see a ray of hope. But even that is in danger, right? So we have to continue and not let down our guard. And I also want to add a couple, of things that are positives, right? I think that our community began to, in our experience, began to see and to understand the real power, and understand that together, in solidarity with other movements as well, that we could be stronger, that our voices could be stronger. I think that we began to see our communities reaching out outside of their communities for allies, and therefore to learn about new issues like racial justice, for example, and how we could partner with other organizations that are not immigrant rights organizations, and other, again, potential champions and allies to continue to strengthen the immigrant rights movement. I think that we said, you know what? we should not be compromising justice, right? When we thought about immigration reform before, we compromised so much. We always wanted to make sure that we were able to work across the aisle, that we would be able to get some results and get something passed. And I remember even repeating the talking points of starting from an enforcement perspective first when we thought about immigration reform. I think these last 4 years have also helped our community and organizations retake that power and redefine what justice is for us, and redefine what immigration reform is for us from a very humanitarian perspective. And I think that we are going to come out of this stronger, in that we're going to be able to stand our ground and say, no, we want, what our community deserves. We want justice. We want to start from redefine what immigration reform means, and start from a place where we are focusing on keeping families together and making sure that we are addressing the needs of our immigrant families. I think that just to end, I think that the last 4 years have been difficult because this ongoing dichotomy for immigrant families of love-hate, right, was through the roof, was 10 times, 100 times worse. But it has made the immigrant community, I think, find its voice again. And I think that if we continue on this path, building power, building a movement, then we'll be able to face this new era in a much stronger way.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you for bringing two things to the table, which is, I think we can not lose sight of something you just mentioned, which is the attack on immigrants. It's coupled with the attack on people of color in general, our LGBTQ folks, just women, you name it, folks with different abilities. Again, it just ranged the spectrum, but it did create opportunities to sort of be very intentional about our intersectionality and those movements. And I think that also this past summer, the last few months, and now the people taking to the streets calling for racial equity and the promise of racial justice, and the continued conversations about investing in communities that have been underserved, including immigrant communities. And I think that is a great transition into sort of what I want to touch on next, which is, as you all mentioned, we are now a mere 2 months away from a new administration taking over the White House. And there are new opportunities for all of you and your work on behalf of immigrants and refugees. And so with that in mind, obviously aware of the challenges that will continue to happen, and the amount of time that it will take to undo some of the lasting damage that's been done in the last 4 years. I want to pose a question to all of you. What new opportunities do you see your teams for advocacy and work at the federal level under this new administration? And again, we'll go around. Maybe we'll start with you, Martha, to share just a little bit about what opportunities do you see and some of the challenges in that.
Well, I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunities, and I think that we will be able to, feel some respite, right, and see that light at the end of the tunnel. But I also, and I think I was heartened by the amount of people that went out to vote, people that still believe in democracy and that our institutions could really work to find solutions, right? And focus on science and truth and all of that, right? And so, but I think that we, even though, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot of work to be done. I think that what was most devastating for me personally after the elections, or the night of the elections, and in the days following, is to come to terms with the fact that over 70 million people voted for this president. And to me, given everything that has happened over the last 4 years, it told me on a very personal level, there's over 70 million people that hate me, that don't like me, that don't like immigrants, and that are racist. And so it told me we have a lot of work to do, a lot of education to do. And so But, definitely there's so many million more, right, that voted for a new chance to save our democracy, for a new chance to reinvent ourselves as a country that does believe in democracy, in justice, and in law, and in protecting those that are most vulnerable, like refugee and immigrants. I think that at the federal level, obviously, we have the opportunity to first and foremost address some immediate issues like DACA and TPS, because we've been fighting over the last 4 years, almost since the beginning of this administration, the termination of those two programs that cover, about 1.5 million people, if not more, and that is, people with TPS who have from Central America who have had TPS for 20 plus years. If those folks who have to submit to an FBI background check every 18 months for the last 20 plus years haven't proven that they deserve protection and that they deserve a permanent solution, then we're in worse shape than we thought. And so I think that the Biden administration has a real opportunity to very quickly really restore those programs, and then really begin to work with our organizations and our communities and Congress to find permanent solutions for those communities. I think that the road to citizenship, permanent residency for those populations is something that even the general public, agrees that there should be an opportunity. And I think lastly, because I know Judy and Angelica have a lot more to add, but I think lastly, I want to just kind of repeat a little bit of, we need to, really understand our voice, harness our power, and really take it back and redefine what we want for our families and for our communities. And I think that we should dream big. I think that we should be bold. And I think that we should fight for what our families truly deserve. And it should be defined by the people that are most affected. And they should be the ones front and center, the ones voicing and leading these movements and these legislative efforts or potential solutions.
Thank you, Martha. Judy, you want to chime in on this issue of what opportunities you see under this incoming administration?
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more with Martha's comments. It is time to be bold. It is time to demand equity. I think this is a moment where we see the light and we see the hope, where we see people mobilized, we see allies starting to understand the connections between racial injustice, the criminalization of people of color, and the criminalization of immigrants of color. And this is hopeful, because there really is a much larger army fighting for a bold vision. And in terms of what that means policy-wise, a lot rides on what happens with Congress and with Georgia. But putting that aside, obviously we have a lot more hope with Trump gone, and with Biden-Harris. Senator Harris has been, Vice President Harris, very involved in the Central American struggle and a tremendous ally. And Biden has, there were a lot of problems under the Obama administration. He's owned them, and so we're looking forward ahead. The priorities for our team are going to be to restore asylum as quickly as possible, and we don't need Congress to do that. And we need to hold accountable the new administration too quickly. Restore the rights of asylum seekers, but again, be bolder, particularly when it comes to detention. This was not, a detention system was not built by President Trump. The detention system started long ago. It had actually, one of the most damaging expansions happened with legal changes under the Clinton administration. So we need to really call out what that system is, which is about criminalizing people of color, and we need to tear it down. And there are ways that can be done, even if you don't have the support of Congress. So our, again, the restoration of asylum, the end of this, what's known as the Remain in Mexico policy, where we have thousands of asylum seekers languishing endangered in the streets of Mexico. They need to be brought in and given due process, and we need to stop detaining immigrants. So I think there's a lot of anticipation because the demands are going to be great. I would just invite everyone to get involved in this fight. We need to keep the heat on. We need to make our voices heard, and we need allies to keep joining this movement and make sure that this agenda is front and center when the new administration comes on board.
Thank you, Judy. You started off adding to the list that Martha was listing, but I do know that Angelica probably has a few other things to add. So you want to share with us from Chila's perspective, what are the opportunities that you see?
Yeah, I was just going to say, of course, what Martha said, and of course, what Judy said. I think we have a responsibility, and maybe this is continuing on what Martha's point was, which is that we have a responsibility to be authentic representatives of the demands of our community, and that is our responsibility. And we understand that there will be difficulty, especially in the House and the Senate. I was just right before this, we were in a call with, trying to support folks in Georgia who are doing immigrant rights there and who are also very much involved in the Get Out the Vote campaign. The point that we have is that, and from our vantage point, is our community needs immediately a moratorium on detention and deportations. That's what they need. They need the enforcement to stop. In the last 10 years, and this is for the Latino community, since 2008 to 2018, about 92% of the individuals who have been detained and deported from this country have been Mexicans, Hondurans, Salvadoreños, and Guatemaltecos. If you add the next 2%, of the next group, it's folks from South America. So 94% of the people detained and deported have been from Latin America. And of course, many folks languish in detention, our Black brothers and sisters who have some of the longest stays in detention as they're seeking asylum. And let's not speak about, let's speak actually, but let's add to this all the children who are still in detention, families. Family detention should not exist. Children in detention should not exist. That needs to stop. So, I think that needs to be very clear to the Biden-Harris administration that we are not going to continue this enforcement perspective, the criminalization, as Judy said, in this next administration. And yes, we're going to work very hard on affirmative acts, a restoration of DACA, TPS holders who in March, if nothing changes, would have to leave this country. That's not acceptable. That's the kind of restoration of a system that, from our vantage point, is we're going to work as hard as we can to have, as we call it, the day one bill that actually is going to have our vision in mind and work really hard in order to ensure that elected representatives understand that there's a mandate for these actions. And this is where I would say everybody who's listening now can really support. At the end of the day, you're a constituent, and you who are listening have a member of Congress who represents you, and they need to hear from you that you want them to act on your values, and that your values say that immigrants are actually part of our communities. And so that's definitely, I think, something that we're going to work so hard to really rally the support around a bold immigration reform that includes justice. That's what we need. Immigration reform and immigrant justice. And so we understand that we've always been swimming upstream in seeking support for our communities. We know that. We know it's going to be hard, but we're not going to dissuade, we're not going to get people off the hook when things are hard. Imagine how hard it's been for the last 4 years for our immigrant community. And look how courageously they have stood by and defended their communities. And so we're just asking our elected representatives who have now been elected to have just a little bit of courage similar to that of our communities. And so that's where I stand from. We're realists. We understand what sometimes the political dynamics are, but we're also, certainly pushed by the suffering and that we have seen, and the suffering that will continue if nothing changes in terms of the enforcement. So that's, that's really where we're at. But we have hope because we changed this political dynamic. I mean, this is a result of people of color, indigenous people throughout this country standing up and saying, I will take action. So that also inspires you to see the possibilities of what we can move forward.
Thank you. And I think one point that you all made, regardless of what happens with Congress, and we're hoping again, supporting, the work that's still happening. And in that sense, there's a lot that was done in the last 4 years without congressional approval, and that's at least a place to start. But I think you're right, Angelica, in the sense that our communities, our immigrant and refugee communities, also deserve to think bigger, and to think about there's an opportunity now to create the type of immigration system that we all envision being more humane, realistic, practical, that puts above everything else family unity, and the actual real needs of labor in this country, with protections and all of those things that you've all been working on for the last few decades. So I think that's a good thing to remember. I want to transition us to something that you were starting to talk about, Judy and Angelica, which is what can we do? What can the folks watching do to support the work that you all will be continuing to do? And now, especially now that there is an opportunity to weigh in, to advocate for the type of work we want to see. If you each want to share with the audience a couple of ways that they can be involved, a call to action, if you will, on how to get involved, be part of this change, and again, lift their voices in this fight as well. And it can be at the local, state, federal level. So I'll turn it over to each of you for a couple of minutes. Maybe Angelica, we'll start with you, since you were starting to talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is continue to support Public Counsel. We are very lucky to have such an incredible organization that has continued to speak up and to represent us in some of the worst battles. So I just really want to say to everybody, if you're supporting Public Counsel already, continue to do so. If you haven't, please do that. And I always want to say it's important for these immigrant rights organizations in your community to be supported. In many instances, these are organizations that are working with very little, and so it's important to support them in that way. And then in terms of, and this is where it's like the active citizenship, right? So we just right now completed an election in which we all participated. Let's continue that participation. So at least on our end, we ask, go to our website, become a member of the organization, support the policy and advocacy moving forward, our campaigns for immigration reform and justice. It's important that you get activated. Now in your home, one of the first things you have to do, now you have elected, your city council, your state elected official, and your member of Congress. And I know that some races are still to be called, but still go to them right now and let them know that immigration reform and immigration justice and all the things that we've described are important to you. That matters so much. You might not think so, but it's so important that you convey that to them, because it really allows them to connect their constituencies with the values that we've all described, and that then it really tells them that this is something that it matters. The other thing is become a volunteer, become connected, get engaged. There's so many different activities that are going to be happening in order to reverse a lot of this. So there are many volunteer opportunities as well in our organizations. that you can become a part of. And there's so much from maybe just the direct service. We still continue during COVID, to support individuals with economic relief, especially because many are completely excluded from federal assistance, et cetera. So to also participate in that way. And there's so many ways to help. And we want to just say we welcome you, and we also thank you for continuing to just really care about this issue.
Thank you, Angelica. Marta, I'll turn it over to you for some suggestions as well.
Yeah, so definitely everything that Angelica said, support public counsel, support our organizations, join, our activities, help us, keep accountability, to this new administration and to this new Congress and to elected officials at all levels. Continue the education from family member to family member, neighbor to neighbor about the issues. Continue when I also say continue to support our organizations. Also, I think that understand just really the impact of our organizations in the community. I think through the pandemic, we've realized that not only are we immigrant rights organizations, but we're rapid response, humanitarian aid, etc., emergency financial assistance organizations. And so we are part of the safety net of the city, of this county, of the state, of this country. And so, and we also need many more immigration lawyers. So help us. I think law schools and students really should, make it entice folks to go into this line of work. There's a shortage of immigration lawyers, so we need more lawyers. But again, just continue to be supportive and to be active and to learn more about our work.
Thank you, Marta. Judy, you want to share some thoughts on this?
Sure. I'm not sure how different I'm going to sound, but yes, support public counsel, support our partner groups, Citizenship and Chirla, all immigration groups need your support. But first, use your voice. It's been said by my colleagues. I think this was a real lesson for particularly young people that voting matters and voices matter. And they've been raised very loudly over the past 3 months. We need your voices now more than ever. So what does that look like? It means tomorrow, pick up the phone, go to the Biden-Harris website, reach out by email, by text, call a staffer, and say you want bold reform on immigration and that this matters to you. And that means, whether you're from the immigrant community or you're new to this issue, explain why you care. And again, I can't emphasize enough that we need to keep the momentum going, particularly in the first few months of this administration. And I know that there are a lot of lawyers, I think, tuning in tonight. Thank you all who've supported public counsel by volunteering. If you haven't, I urge you to do so. I think that the work is enormously complex, but enormously rewarding. And so, now's the time. We need lawyers to take cases and work with us. We need a really pretty significant commitment, but we'll be there every step of the way to teach you and to mentor you. So, yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, ladies. We do have, so that was really helpful, and it's a good reminder. There are so many ways to get involved as part of local government. Your voices matter, and there will be, I think, new opportunities for the city to advocate on some of the issues that Mayor Garcetti has weighed in on and has led not just locally but nationally on some of these issues. So hearing from constituents is important, as Angelica mentioned. So I do encourage you to continue to advocate now more than ever, again, with an expanded vision of what we want to see. We have some questions from the audience, so I'm gonna throw some of them out here, and you all can raise your hand. But that we have a lot of really good questions. Some of them may have answered partially by some of you, but if you want to weigh in, please do so. Our first question is from Stephen Ma. The current harsh immigration policies have been exacerbated over the last 4 years, but were also existent prior, which some of you have mentioned. This isn't new, it's just a new level of cruel. What changes do you expect in the new administration? And I'm going to tweak it a little bit because we talked about that, but what changes do you expect to see immediately, and what do you think will take sort of a longer term to address?
I'll start with, I think my hope, the Biden, Bernie Sanders Unity Task Force basically actually outlined a moratorium for 100 days. We're asking for way longer than 100 days, of course, but that's my hope. My hope is we start with that, and that on day one, a lot of the executive orders that were actually put forward by the Trump administration get repealed, and that they're, so certainly I think that undoing, it's going to take a long time to undo because there's so many, but certainly I think that these reversals are critical. And then I think then the question, which is then what's going to take longer, as was said, these were here beforehand, and many of us, and earlier we said there was many years between all of us in this fight, but we've been fighting for a reimagination of this immigration system. This immigration system is not just, it's not humane. It focuses on criminalization. It basically, it centers punishment and persecution over humanitarian action and family unity, or also the protection of workers. So I think, that it's going to take more time, but that is what the work is. And so we need to move on legislative matters and again, push elected officials to take these issues on. There's really great legislation already in place that has been, the Reunifying Families Act, a new way forward. I mean, I can go on and on in terms of a lot of the legislation that has been put forward that actually describes a lot of these changes. And so now what we have to do is beyond having just beyond just having the legislation is really taking action on it. And then I think the other pieces are affirmative administrative relief. We saw with DACA that it is possible. We need to continue to explore parole in place and other deferred action that can actually help some of our community.
I just want to add one point about the moratorium on deportations, because that does have to go hand in hand with releasing folks from detention to save lives because of COVID. And we haven't really had an opportunity to talk about that much tonight, but COVID is devastating to immigrant communities, and it's killing people in detention. So that's just, again, something that people can use their voices in those first 100 days and say, yes, stop the deportations, but also empty the detention centers. Another point that probably immigration lawyers know, but perhaps the general public doesn't know, a lot can be done with executive action. And in terms of the Department of Justice, a strange thing about immigration law that the Attorney General has a huge amount of power and can essentially rewrite any immigration court decision. And that's why we've seen the dismantling of our asylum system. The succession of attorney generals, one worse from the last, have all just simply taken a decision they didn't like and rewritten it. So these appointments matter a lot, and we do anticipate having an attorney general that's very focused on using that role to restore a humanitarian lens and equity to our immigration system. And that can happen on day one.
I also want to add a couple of things. I think that I'm really hopeful also that this administration would look at root causes. This immigration system hasn't worked even for the anti-immigrants. People keep coming and we have one crisis after another at the border. And so I really hope that we rethink the relationship between the United States and the Central American and Latin American region, when 94% of people that have been deported are from Latin America. Right now, for example, Central America is experiencing two back-to-back hurricanes that are very much linked to climate change, very much linked to the relationship of expectation and imperialism from, Western, countries like the United States in that region. And, these regions facing deforestation that is devastating. And when hurricanes come, it really devastates those countries and those economies and those communities. And so rethinking the relationship of the United States and the region, rethinking foreign policy again, less of a militarization perspective, less, because the majority of foreign assistance and foreign aid to those countries is for military spending, not for rebuilding, not for, addressing some, key systemic issues in that region. And so we need to rethink that. And also in the immigrant rights movement, I think we need to expand what immigrant rights is, not to have just a domestic perspective, but to have a transnational perspective.
Thank you, Martha. That was great. I'm gonna send this question to you, Judy. The question is from Betsy Ma. What do you expect with processing of cases post the change of administration, and how can others support? And this may go to how quickly can we see a change in the way things are operating under a new administration?
Yeah, so I think that we do anticipate a period where there'd sort of be a pause button hit to give the Department of Justice and Executive Office of Immigration Review the opportunity to really sort of audit what's happened and make necessary changes, review cases that are of significant public interest that have really gone the wrong way. The expectations are really high from the immigration bar community to get relief. I think we have to watch our expectations and sort of keep our eyes on the prize. But I do expect that there will be some sort of pause where the government will be reissuing policies or essentially replacing the bad policies, restoring with good policies. But again, maybe not, it's going to take some time, certainly, because of the extensive amount of policy changing that's happened.
And there is so much that can be done, like you all mentioned, with executive action, changes in regulations, guidance from the agencies, training and staffing, but some of that may take a little longer. So the hitting the pause button is probably one of the first asks. We have a question from Stephen. Is there some sort of public list of specific immigration proposals by your organizations or others to present to the administration or other officials? Anything that regular folks who may not be as involved in this can also begin pushing behind or chiming in on any way to make their voices heard?
So Angelica probably has an equally wonderful resource. I've been referring people to that Immigration Legal Resource Center. That's ilrc.org. You can find their blueprint for the future. And they've really spent years working with immigrant communities to really reflect what communities want to see. It's specific, but it's not so nerdy that if you're not an immigration lawyer, you'll fall asleep. You'll be engaged and you'll be able to understand what the asks are. So I'd refer you to that blueprint document at ilrc.org.
And I would just also say, Carecen and Chirla, we have come together with many other organizations across the state of California to put together what our day one proposal is, from California. We also believe that California can have such a strong voice because we have the largest number of immigrants in terms of just our population of immigrants is so large, a third of our state. If you add their children, that's close to 50%, but also the largest number of documented individuals, TPS holders, and the list just goes on, agricultural workers. And so we feel that as Californians, And also as Angelinos, we have to stand forward and put forward this agenda. So you can go to our websites, on www.chilla.org, or, I'm sure Martha will go through that too, but you can already see some of the principles, some of the work that's been happening. The work is in progress in terms of finalizing our demands, but they're simple: restore asylum and refugee protections. Family unity is very important for us. We've seen what separation at the border, but also separation at the interior looks like. We also feel important, that a whole reformulation of enforcement, like get rid of all of this enforcement. Again, we think it's been enough, and so that there's a listing very specifically of that, and administrative relief. So so I just would say, continue to go to the websites, because there'll be more and more opportunities to get involved, to sign petitions, and to connect those not so wonky, but basically very important, what I would say, values connected, policy values that you will be able to look at and also sign up for, support.
I just want to add that Angelica mentioned the Biden-Sanders plan. It's really comprehensive in terms of, pretty specific asks and potential legislative requests, and both administrative and legislative. Also, I think as part of the National TPS Alliance, the National TPS Alliance has already a proposal for the new administration regarding TPS and DACA. Of restoration of the programs, expansion of the programs, and permanent solutions, right? Road to residency or citizenship for this population. So there's the kind of the macro level, and then you get into those, kind of like the Biden plan, where it goes very specific in all of the areas. And then there's specific communities that have also developed, more specific asks beyond the principles that Angelica was mentioning.
So I think we have time for one last question, and I'm going to ask this one because I don't want either myself or Judy to get in trouble, because it's from Judy's mom. So she is, like many of us, following the news and all the fantastic work by the ACLU and others, thinking of all of those children, at least 666, who remain separated from their parents, and what can folks do to support in that effort locally?
I guess I have to respond, Mom. So again, make your voice heard, and I really appreciate everyone's interest on the separated families. I represent several families who went through that horrific experience, the policy at the border. But I think it's important that we all understand that family separation happens every day in our communities. So our hearts break for those 546 children, and we need accountability, and we need compensation for these families. We need trauma care. We need legalization for these families. But the reality is we need that for thousands of families who've been separated. I just took a call today. A mom, I'll give you the details later, but a friend of mine can no longer be in her home with her family because ICE came to the house looking for someone else. And now this family is afraid to be there and are on the cusp of homelessness. So what do you do? I mean, we're giving you all the doom and gloom. Again, phone, text, email, make your voice heard, check out some of the resources we've talked about the blueprints, but it really can be a simple message when you contact your local elected official, whether it's your city council person or the federal level, your congressman, your senator, the new administration. Shout out that you want to see a humane immigration policy and an end to enforcement.
Thank you, ladies. I do want to just briefly mention, because this came up, we did not touch on COVID-19 and the tremendous impact that is having locally and across the nation on disproportionately impacting communities of color and by consequence immigrants. But that is a big part of the backdrop of the advocacy and the work that you're all doing and will continue to do. But thank you for a robust conversation. We did have a couple of questions. We ran out of time, unfortunately. So I'm going to turn it over to Philip to wrap up tonight's conversation. Philip, you're on mute.
You'd think you could get through a webinar without hearing one person say you're on mute, but of course not. Thank you very much. Martha Arevalo, Judy London, Angelica Salas, and our moderator, Nora Preciado, for your informed comments, your insights, and for participating in our Hour of Justice series. We join you in holding hope for an end to the darkness that's existed these past 4 years. And we hope for a reimagination of our approach to immigration, and we appreciate your stimulating our thoughts about that. And we also appreciate all the practical suggestions that you've given us about ways we can help. Public Counsel's next Hour of Justice panel will focus on recent Supreme Court and appellate decisions that are moving the social justice needle. We'll have a date and further details soon. In the meantime, I encourage all of you to register for the future series. Just go to hourofjustice.org and you can register and be informed of every one of our panels coming up. And for more information about how you can support Public Counsel's work, whether through a donation of your time or your treasure, please visit our website at publiccounsel.org. And in closing, in a year that presents challenges to many of you and your families, unlike any other in our lifetimes, we wish all of you a very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you all, and good night.